The Midnight Visitor. The town of Ashbrook was blanketed in silence as the clock struck midnight. Martha Thompson, a widow, living alone in her old, creaky house, was jolted awake by a faint tapping at her window. She sat up, her heart pounding in the stillness of the night. The sound was soft but persistent, an insistent knock that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Martha hesitated, gripping the edges of her blanket. Who could be outside at this hour? Ashbrook was a quiet town where nothing ever happened, and midnight visitors were unheard of. She glanced at her cat, Mr. Whiskers, who was perched on the foot of her bed, staring intently at the window, his fur bristling. Gathering her courage, Martha slid out of bed and approached the window. The tapping continued, a rhythmic beat against the glass. Her breath fogged the window as she peered out, trying to see through the darkness. At first, she saw nothing, only the shadowy outline of the trees in her yard swaying gently in the breeze. But then, as her eyes adjusted, she saw it, a figure standing just beyond the edge of her lawn. The figure was tall and impossibly thin, its features obscured by the night. It didn't move, didn't wave, just stood there, motionless, as if waiting. A cold shiver ran down Martha's spine. She reached for the window latch but hesitated. Something about the figure filled her with a deep sense of dread. Suddenly, the tapping stopped. The figure took a step forward, coming into the dim light cast by the moon. Martha's breath hitched as she saw its face, or rather, the lack of one. The figure had no eyes, no nose, no mouth, just a smooth, featureless surface where a face should be. It was as if a shadow had taken on human form. Martha stumbled back, her hand covering her mouth to stifle a scream. The figure didn't move, but she could feel its gaze, cold and penetrating, as if it was seeing right through her. Panic surged through her as she turned and ran to her bedroom door, fumbling with the lock. She could hear the tapping again, louder now, more urgent, echoing in her ears as she bolted down the hallway. She reached the front door and threw it open, gasping for air as she stepped out onto the porch. But the yard was empty. The figure was gone, leaving only the swaying trees and the rustling leaves in its wake. The next morning, when Martha told her neighbors about the midnight visitor, they dismissed it as a dream or a figment of her imagination. But deep down, Martha knew what she had seen was real, and she wasn't the only one. That night, as the clock struck midnight, the tapping began again, this time at the home of young Tommy Sanders, 3 houses down. And so, the midnight visitor continued its eerie rounds, moving from house to house, a harbinger of something dark and unknowable. The townspeople were about to learn that once you'd seen the visitor, it was only a matter of time before it came for you.